Good afternoon, Facebook. Today's April 11th, 2020, and it is 2:57 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. Weekend streaming, weekend broadcasts. I'm quite a bit more lax. Here it is getting into the late afternoon, and I'm just now getting started with it, but that's okay. I'm not too worried about it because don't really intend to broadcast for very long today. I just wanted to, as I keep saying, continue the continuity. That's an important element of this. It's really important to have some semblance of structure so I can have something to get up and feel like I'm in a habit of doing something instead of just sitting around eating. So, anyway, let's just get the grim details out of the way first. The United States is now sitting at 528,992 positive or confirmed cases. We have hit 20,456 fatalities. That's worth note because we now have the highest number of reported fatalities from coronavirus of any nation on the planet, including Italy. Their rate of mortality continues to be a lot higher than ours, but we have now lost more lives to coronavirus than any other nation on Earth. New York State remains, as anticipated, the hardest hit state. They're currently reporting 180,458 positive or confirmed cases, with 8,627 fatalities as of this morning. That's 34% of the total number of cases nationwide. They were well over half for a long time. Now they're at 34%, barely over one third. That looks like it could indicate that we're starting to see a deceleration in the number of new cases, especially as compared with other cases. Hotspots that the country's looking at right now include Detroit, although there's some encouraging numbers there, Louisiana. Uh, Denver apparently has become a hotspot. There was a spike in numbers, according to what I saw in the press briefing with the coronavirus task force from yesterday. I don't know if they're going to be doing one today. I'll have to check on that. Now, the White House, according to information released in their most recent press availability that I've seen, indicates that a new, let's call it, task force is going to be established fairly soon, whose aim is going to be managing the gradual and incremental reopening of the United States economy. I anticipate this is going to happen region by region. Places like my former home state of Nebraska, which, by the way, they're now sitting at precisely 700 positive or confirmed cases with 17 reported fatalities. They are sitting in 42nd place, 42nd out of the 50 states, 42nd place in Nebraska. And interestingly, Wyoming has now fallen back to 50th place. So they've experienced some kind of cessation or extreme slowing down of new cases, at least insofar as what the latest report says. Now, the anticipated and impending formation of a new task force, which they're going to call a council for the avoidance of confusion with the other task force, the formation of a new council, which is that formation is still underway, their goal being to examine and establish the parameters for the reopening of the United States economy, to me, is an encouraging sign. It means that instead of focusing all of our energy on how to slow the spread and study different methods for treating the ill, we're actually proactively examining ways to get the country back open and back running for business. I'm really very much looking forward to that. In 4 days, no, I'm sorry, in 2 days, it will have been a full month since the last day that I went and clocked in and earned a day's wages. A full month without working. I'm not sure exactly how to feel about that. My outlook on many things is changing. And the idea of life being even able to return to the way that it was prior to all of this, I'm not seeing it. I think that a life is forever changed for all of us because of this. An entire month of not being able to go earn a living. In fact, I have developed a bit of a sense of guilt because I know that there are other ways that I could be earning money right now. I could be hired at a place that is considered essential, that are seeking a lot of new employees, even if only on a temporary basis. I could be out there working, but I'm not. I'm staying here and staying inside as much as possible. But hey, that is what it is. I'd like to be out there working, but there's also a lot of incentive not to, especially with unemployment and things like that. Now, I have been asked by a couple people who follow this stream and who've been following it to examine Sweden a little bit more closely. That subject appeared in the comments of the live stream from several friends of mine here on Facebook. They wanted me to take a look at what's going on with Sweden because they have not instituted the type of national lockdown that pretty much any other state, including their own Scandinavian neighbors, they have people within their country and within their government and scientific experts, etc., who are saying that this approach they're taking could result in the herd immunity that I have discussed a couple times here on the stream, essentially exposing younger and more healthy people to this virus, allowing them to recover from it, and thus creating a strong concentration within their population of people who are going to be naturally immune from infection. And that taking the long view, which has become necessary to do, this could benefit them in the event that come autumn, when temperatures begin to come back down again, that we may see a second wave of coronavirus cases. That is pretty much accepted as a foregone conclusion by the medical experts who are reporting on television and through news outlets these days that this is going to be, at least in some small manner, a cyclical and a seasonal phenomenon. It seems to me that this will not be eradicated until we have a vaccine. Until we have a vaccine and an effective medicinal treatment for coronavirus, a way to treat it, a way to cure it, and then a way to prevent people through vaccines from getting it. Until we have that, we're not going to see a day in our future when people no longer get sick from COVID-19. We will not have a day until we have vaccines and medicinal treatments. We will not see a day when people no longer die from COVID-19. We're looking at these deadlines that are being given to us by the government, the end of April being the president's slow the spread guidelines having been extended out to the end of April. That certainly is not to suggest that come the end of April, we will have beaten this thing and people will no longer get sick or die from coronavirus. Until we have a vaccine, this is going to be part of our lives, and we can expect that it's going to affect our lives directly until we see that. And every medical expert whom I've heard comment on this seem united in that they are anticipating a vaccine would take 12 to 18 months to fully emerge and become available at large. So that's something to look at. Now, back to Sweden. Several countries throughout Europe, including the United Kingdom, just wanted to ride this thing out without instituting any national requirements to stay safe and to social distance and all the rest of it. United Kingdom tried it for a very short while. I want to say it was only a couple weeks before making the decision based on the outcome of that method that, okay, we've got to stop this. And now that Boris Johnson was in the intensive care unit in a hospital in England, it's a little difficult to justify that method of approaching this. And I understand that he's been released from the ICU, but he's still in the hospital. So I hope that he gets well. I tend to like Boris Johnson so far as prime minister, certainly more than Theresa May. But anyway, looking at Sweden, I have a couple stories here. The most recent of which is a story from Forbes.com. Sweden continues with controversial coronavirus strategy. Is it a big mistake? There is a growing media chorus pointing out that Sweden's relatively relaxed approach to public restrictions amid the coronavirus outbreak is beginning to look like a mistake. One main factor is that Sweden's death rate is continuing to climb more quickly than that of its Nordic neighbors. The rate of intensive care admissions at hospitals is also outpacing the likes of Denmark, Norway, and Finland, as pointed out in a daily briefing compiled by Swedbank. Now, Sweden has a population of 10.23 million people. They are currently looking at 10,151 positive or confirmed cases and a death toll of 887. I saw a breakdown of the mortality rate not among people who have the disease, but just among the population in general, and that puts their death toll, at least as of the 9th of April, at something like 65 per million people in Sweden. Now, that's far ahead of the numbers we're seeing in places like Norway and Denmark, where I think the numbers are like 45 and 20, respectively. I could be wrong about that, but suffice it to say, Sweden's numbers are way above the numbers that we're seeing in places immediately neighboring them in the Scandinavian region. Last weekend, as pointed out in this article, there was a palpable feeling that tighter limits on movement might be on their way if those numbers kept growing. But the numbers haven't apparently reached levels high enough to worry the Public Health Agency, it seems, and life in Sweden nearly a week later looks much the same. In Stockholm, a string of sunny early spring days over the Easter holidays have seen plenty of people out to enjoy it. Some appear to keep a distance from those around them, while others make no such efforts. Many grocery stores have now installed plexiglass barriers between cashier and customer, and have put tape down on the floor to indicate how far apart each person in the queue should stand. We're actually doing the same thing over here at the grocery store in my neighborhood. There's a piece of plexiglass at the cash register between the cashier and the customer, and there's squares on the ground. So that's also taking place in Sweden. Did I lose my place here? At the National Liquor Store, a clerk holds people back at the entrance to make sure there aren't too many people shopping at any given time. Streets downtown remain quieter than usual, but there are people out, going to restaurants, and so on. So bars and restaurants in Sweden have remained open. There is a lot of guidance coming from the Swedish government to advise their populations how to act in relation to one another and how to practice social distancing, but it has not reached the level of being a mandate, at least not at this time. And the result is that of that region of the world in Europe, northwestern Europe, they are experiencing a higher numbers by significant margins. I want to say that Worldometers had their death rate at, like I say, what was it, 10,151 cases, whereas the next highest Scandinavian country was less than 6,000. So this is telling. It would seem to suggest that Sweden's somewhat lax approach to how they're handling this is backfiring. I was hoping to find information that would suggest that Sweden's approach to dealing with this is prudent, and that by contrast, you could make the case that other countries whose approach has been far more strict has been an overreaction, and that is not what I've found. I found a couple stories, I found information on worldometers.info to indicate that their approach is somewhat irresponsible, unfortunately. Now, again, that's not taking into account whether or not their tabulation of COVID-19 deaths is the same as ours. I touched on this a while ago, where a person who's got pneumonia and goes to the hospital testing positive for coronavirus but dies of pneumonia is then counted as a COVID-19 death. Or if somebody comes in for heart problems and those heart problems eventually take their lives, but they also happen to be testing positive for coronavirus, even if they were not symptomatic, then they are counted among the death toll of COVID-19 deaths. So I don't know whether or not Sweden is looking at the information the same way. If it's not, if these numbers are not being uniformly tabulated, then these numbers don't really mean a whole lot. And I have more information I'd like to touch on today on that vein, but suffice it to say for now, with respect to Sweden, Sweden has taken a far different approach to any other nation, specifically within that region, for how they're addressing this, and the results seem to be not so much in the favor of the people of Sweden. So I don't really know how much more scrutiny that requires. If we're to take these numbers at face value and to trust their validity, then I'd say that Sweden needs to change its approach and needs to change its approach pretty quickly. I'm going to keep an eye on it. But so far, I don't see any glaring example that their method is superior to that of any other country. It sucks what the rest of us have to deal with right now. It sucks, this monumental interruption to our lives, but there is no indication that being more lax is a good idea, at least not according to these numbers. Now, bringing it back to the United States and to the way that our federal government and the White House is responding to things, I have begun to sense somewhat of a division within the White House. There are people like Dr. Deborah Birx and Dr. Tony Fauci on the coronavirus task force who are using the information that they've got, including these models and these projections, in as a way to inform their own recommendations for how nationally to handle this and what guidance to give to various state and local governments for how they should handle this thing. This is coming from these models, which I have illustrated as being a little bit less than reliable and a little bit less than consistent. Um, but they are continuing to err on the side of caution, as it were. They are continuing to advise in the direction of maintaining social distancing and other guidelines, keeping people away from each other, keeping schools closed, keeping businesses closed, discouraging any social gatherings. They continue to sort of persuade and advise in that direction. Whereas then you've got Steve Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, right? Is that his position, his title? And then you've got Larry Kudlow, who are also within the White House and advising the president to examine how prudent it may be to reopen the economy. So there's a division. There's two forces. One advising and encouraging people to continue staying in lockdown, and the other, for economic reasons, saying that opening the economy again, at least incrementally, starting in the least affected regions such as Iowa, Nebraska, and other places, as compared to places like New York. So there is division and competing interests within the White House. Now, that's not unusual. That's not unusual at all. Every White House, every administration is going to have a spectrum of sometimes contradictory advice, but it's ultimately up to the president to make those decisions in so much as his authority grants him to do so. Now, it seems like there are those who are skeptical that the people on the coronavirus task force, specifically Dr. Birx and Dr. Fauci, are far more of the establishmentarian stripe than is the president himself. And so there is concern that instead of being the renegade that got him elected into office, he's somewhat surrendering his authority to the experts who are very much Washington, D.C. establishmentarians. And I'm not going to buy that any more than I'm going to buy any other criticism. I think that what's going to happen is just going to be what's going to happen. But there is some rather interesting literature that I've come across that at least examines this particular phenomenon in far more detail. And so I found this piece by a guy named Angelo Codavia. He wrote something way back in 2009 that I just loved. This piece that divides the country's population into two classes: the country class versus the ruling class. And he's maintained that verbiage in describing establishmentarians as being ruling class all throughout. And in this article, which was released on April 8th at amgreatness.com, he examines the idea that the president is sort of putting his seal of approval on advice given by the very establishment that he ran to oppose. But there are some interesting parts in here and some pretty good lines that I wanted that I wanted to look at. If I can just find it, let's see here. Okay, I'm just going to start about halfway through. Like all who pay attention, the president knows that the number of confirmed cases means nothing. I'm going to repeat that line. The number of confirmed cases means nothing because most infections do not result in cases, and hence that the real number for COVID-19 infections is certainly higher, possibly by an order of magnitude. Also, the counting of deaths from COVID-19 is being revised downward because many of these deaths result from other causes and are attributed to COVID-19 only because the person happens to also have tested positive. The smaller numerator and the enormously larger denominator means that the real lethality rate is a fraction of 1%. That is why the curves Fauci, the medical establishment, the media, and Democratic governors cite for keeping the country shut down mean nothing. The president also knows that this establishment is hurting Americans by restricting the use of hydroxychloroquine, while physicians on the front lines and millions of people who feel endangered are benefiting from it or yearning for it. Yet, in the face of criticism from the establishment, the president has muted his statements of what he knows to be true about it. The president is eager to open the country, and he knows that the American people will hold him, not Fauci, not Dr. Birx, or anyone else responsible for the pain that adherence to the ruling class's estimates is causing and will cause us. Speculating why, nevertheless, the president persists in lending legitimacy to these flawed professionals, indeed why he lets them speak in his name, is pointless. One thing is certain, I'm skipping ahead a little bit here, that the ruling class, and this is important, I really want to draw emphasis to this passage here. The ruling class savors the grip on us that it has achieved during the past 3 weeks. Above all the presumptions that we must quietly accept non-legal decrees from on high, it will not give up that grip without a fight. I think that is perhaps the most important line from my point of view in this whole piece. For better or worse, the Washington establishment has now attained complete control over the lives of the vast majority of American citizens. Doing so for prudent reasons, of course. But one thing that I've come to suspect about people who gain power, what is it from the Star Wars? Those who gain power are afraid to lose it? Is that true? If so, how easily is the federal government going to give up the control that it's now exerted over so many people's lives? I'm concerned that it's not going to be as easy or as smooth a transition back to normalcy as it should be. And I am also concerned that the way that our lives now look and have been looking for the past 3 weeks or more is going to have a certain permanence from which we will not be able to escape. That concerns me a lot. So with that rather grim thought, I'm going to go ahead and leave it. I don't know if I'm going to do a stream tomorrow. It's something of a holiday. I'm not much of a practicing Christian, but Easter has always been a day that I've used to reflect on things on a more spiritual level. So I don't know if I'll be doing one of these. I might. We'll see. So for now, I'm just going to go ahead and sign off, and everybody continue being safe and be good to each other.